Ciao, amici! We hope you enjoy this video you're about to watch. We want to share all this language learning, linguistic stuff with other people, so please spread the word, like the video, comment, send it to your friends. Very cool.
And you said that you do field linguistics, basically going into the wild, like you once mentioned in your class, going to the wild, getting loose data, not even loose data, extracting the data first, extracting the data, and tell us a little bit about that. What did you do? What is field? What you said? I already mentioned what's field linguistics, but what does a field linguist do? And tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, a field linguist is ready to observe language in its natural context, so where people actually use it. And typically what field linguists like me are interested in are small language communities, endangered or minority language communities. And so how you get interested in one of those communities is different for every person, I suppose. For me, I love the Amazon jungle. I spent some time there, and I just love being in the jungle. And so lots of the communities I explore are in the Amazon jungle. Though I've done work in Africa and India and other places too.
Oh, really?
Right? So I'm happy to go anywhere. It's just that I just like the Amazonian languages a lot. And you find communities who maybe need help or who you can offer help for, and then you get to work. You work on the sounds and you build up until you find a common communicative tool, right? And yeah.
Fascinating.
I'm very curious here. Let's say we learn languages, right? We love language learning.
Yeah.
I've studied 8 languages,
Nice.
actually maybe more. I think if you count the ones I sucked at, like Mandarin Chinese. But all of these languages have one thing in common. They're all known, I'll say, languages with a lot of speakers, with millions of speakers, and where you can find a lot of free material online
like
to
English
learn.
and German and Chinese.
Like English, German, Chinese, Russian, Arabic, all of this you can find. But how do you learn a language like the languages you studied, like an endangered language in the Amazon, or even languages that have no script, or you only you're like Xinca, the language you know. By the way, Chris is the last Xinca speaker on Earth.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. So how does one go about into learning a language like that?
I don't think it's that different from learning any other language, but there's usually a contact language that you share with speakers. So typically for me, it's Spanish, right? And so I go into a community and they speak maybe a little bit of Spanish and I speak okay Spanish, and then we meet in the middle and I learn their language. And once I start feeling comfortable communicating basic phrases, I can switch to their language. I've done it once where there was no contact language, and I just had to learn their language just from observing. And that was very, very difficult because it's a lot of miming and acting it out and getting it wrong, completely wrong. You're like, oh, this means I'm tired. No, it actually doesn't mean I'm tired, right? And you get a lot of confused.
How does one do that? Like how well? I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Well, this is the question. How well do you do it? Just like anything else, you build it up from basic principles to general principles, right? So there's going to be a lot of setbacks, a lot of mistakes, and to document a language that doesn't have a lot of speakers or doesn't have any resources available to you to study takes years.
Really? Yeah. How many years?
Well, typical documentation projects last somewhere between 3 and 5 years. But in that 3 and 5 years, we can get a good chunk described, but that doesn't mean that it's documented because language is always changing. We're using it in new scenarios, right? So there's always more that can be done. So we put this arbitrary designation, like what can you do in 3 to 5 years? And we can get a good chunk of it done.
Well, what would you say you've gained? What is the significance of documenting these languages? What has it meant to you personally, and what can those of us who are interested in languages but aren't participating in this kind of work, what's important for us to know about it or take away from it?
Well, first, that all languages are cool. Right? That's the most important. Lots of people just think like, oh, I don't know these weird languages you talk about, or there are some kind of really hard languages or not developed, or they don't have grammar, or I've heard all kinds of weird
Yeah.
prejudices about languages, right?
Sure.
That's the first thing, right? All languages are equal, right? They're just used by different people and for different reasons. Um, the other things I could tell you about doing this stuff is that we can do it even on English. I mean, people who are interested in like sociolinguistics or social aspects of language, they're doing language documentation. They're just doing it on a language they already speak and know really well.
Right.
It's the same process. It's just that you don't have to first learn the language to go about it. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
Fascinating. So can you tell us a little bit of some stories about the Amazon? I heard you almost got shot by an arrow. Is that true?
yeah. Yeah, there's fun. I don't like most of the time I do field work, it's pretty boring. I'm just sitting there at a desk typing, working with a speaker, kind of like this, where there's a mic in front of both of us and we're talking and I'm recording. And then I go in the evenings and I just do a lot of translation and analysis. And when I'm doing there, I usually work some like 8 hours a day for every day. You know, I don't get any breaks, and it's really exhausting. Right? Usually, it's very, very time consuming. But once in a while, some things are amazingly fun to happen, adventures that you get to have. One time I was traveling upriver through Ecuador. Actually, it started in Ecuador, and I was traveling up towards Colombia. And on a river, we were in a canoe, and we were looking for a community of speakers to work with. And our guide was like, "Well, we have to go through this territory because this territory is, guarded by so and so people." I can't even remember the names. This was so long ago. But well, we ended up needing to stop to refuel or something. There was a reason that we had to get out of the canoe and just take a break. So we got on the sand, and as soon as we did, some arrows came out of the jungle right at our feet.
Oh my gosh.
And if they had wanted to kill us, they would have, right? But
Wow.
It was more just like a warning shot saying, hey, don't forget, we've set this boundary. You're not allowed to cross. And so we got back in the canoe and left. And I have no idea who it was that shot at us or why, but that was a fun experience. Other ones are less death-defying, right? Sometimes, I take a lot of recording equipment and materials with me when I record, because you have to when I document. But the number of times that I've lost books and recording equipment into the rivers
Really?
Gosh.
is significant, right? I'm like, oh, and so one time I had spent 2 weeks documenting a language in Argentina, and we were on a river. And there was some turbulence in the water that we were on. I hadn't been careful with my work. It was just paper. It wasn't electronic equipment, but my notebook fell in the river. And so that 2 weeks of work, gone.
Oh gosh.
Right? Luckily, I had electronic backups of all of it, and so I could recreate it. But the actual handwritten notes and stuff are lost, or textbooks. So I take textbooks with me to read, or just random books. They're also lost in the rivers, right? So that I've done that. Yeah, so lots of really fun things happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
River pollution.
I know.
Yeah, I know. I feel bad, right?
You've made your mark.
Yeah. Someday somebody's going to find it and be like, oh.
Wow. That's really cool. I wonder how you got started in language documentation, and just where does your passion for language come from?
Well, I can tell you, are we okay talking about missions and stuff on
Yeah.
this podcast?
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
So I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Peru in 1997 through 99. And for 17 months of the 24 months that I served, I was in the Amazon jungle.
In the Amazon. Yeah, there's a Amazon.
In Iquitos and Tarapoto and Rioja and some cities up in the northern part of Peru. And I just loved it. I just thought the jungle was amazing, and I loved learning Spanish. And of course, when you're a missionary, you learn Spanish well enough, right? You don't actually learn the language completely.
Sure.
Well, I got home and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I hadn't really had a plan before then. And I decided to take some Spanish classes and maybe pursue a degree in Spanish, which I ended up doing. And while I was doing that, I found linguistics. Like one of the first classes I had to take was a Spanish phonetics class.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, I'd never heard of the International Phonetic Alphabet or a phoneme or an allophone before. And I was just like, what? This is amazing. Right? You could just like transcribe any language, all languages. And so I got really into it. And I decided, okay, I'm going to do a master's degree in this field. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I thought maybe I'll be a professor, but who knows? I love it. So I'm just going to do it. So I got a master's degree in the first semester. I was taking, the typical phonology and morphology classes. And the first semester, there was also a field methods class offered where you learn how to do documentation and field work.
Cool.
And we worked on a language from Mexico called Mixteco. And I couldn't believe someone got paid to do this. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is what I want to do. I'm going to do this. And so I worked with the speaker of Mixteco outside of class. And I went to his village and we did a little documentation, got some experience. Then one got a PhD and just kind of did every project I can think of to get exposure and experience doing this. And I just love it. I love it for lots of different reasons. I love it because I love the structural properties of language. I just love thinking about phonemes and allophones and morphemes and allomorphs. I just love it.
But define those words because people don't know what those
So these are just technical terms to talk about the sound and meaningful units of speech in a language. They're tools that linguists use to understand and to describe languages. But I just love talking about them. And my wife is frequently reminding me that there are other things to talk about.
Not on this podcast, though.
No, you can.
But so I just love it. That's one of the reasons. But I also love it because I feel like I'm helping people. And I really value that. I never wanted to work in a job where I just put on a tie and went to an office and just kind of punched my card and left, right? I wanted to actually see a change and being able to help people document their languages and understand what revitalization means and help students now as a professor. That's really meaningful to me. So
That's awesome.
And I have a question. A lot of people might ask, okay, but why is language revitalization useful? Why is that important? What's your answer to that?
that's a really fair question, and it's a good question. People should be asking these things. Revitalization doesn't mean that we're trying to get people to continue speaking the languages their ancestors spoke. It just means that we want to strengthen the domains where languages are used, where those communities feel that they want to continue using those languages. So, for example, in many communities in the Amazon, they want to keep using their languages at home or for their cultural practices, their rites and rituals, but they'd rather use Spanish or Portuguese in public places like in the government or in school, and they understand that there's a need for that. So revitalization is learning about which domains do you use which language in, and how can we strengthen that pattern, right? Whatever the community wants. Yeah.
Very cool.
Very cool.